If I could return to the guest that we have here on the France 24 set. Thank you very much, Monsieur Leylekian. You're a political scientist. If I could just pick up on that point about the international recognition. Our correspondent Armenian Genocide there mentioned that many people are welcoming this almost a reversal of Germany's position last night that we had from Joachim Gauck. It's interesting that that happened, particularly on the eve of the commemorations today. I wonder if you could just give us your thoughts on that.
Of course, that's very important because, as it has been mentioned, the German authorities were present during the First World War in Turkey with officers, with consuls, with ambassadors, and the position of the German authorities at this time was quite ambiguous. Some of them helped to save some Armenian lives. Some others, on the contrary, were in this stream of the stream of this racial views against Armenians, as afterwards they will be against Jews, you know, during the Second World War. So there are some direct connections. So the fact that Joachim Gauck termed correctly the term genocide is very important. Even I would like to say something about what has been said. We can understand that in Armenia, people have some other concern about their current life, everyday life, you know, jobs and so on and so forth. But jobs, wealth, and so on and so forth. But that's very important to term correctly what is to call a spade a spade. You can, you know, it's important from two points of view. It's important first because denying the truth is keeping on denying the word. Is questioning the status of truth from the philosophical point of view. That's important. Yeah. And second, using the good word would pave the way for a true legal restoration and rehabilitation of the past, you know.
Okay, so important to recognise the truth in this matter. We'll return to our guests in just a moment, but first we want to present the view from some of the people who did manage to escape that genocide 100 years ago. Our correspondents have travelled down to Marseille, where a number of refugees came to France seeking safety. Marseille, of course, the main site for Armenians who were fleeing their homeland. Our correspondent Luke Shrego went to discover just how they came to France and how for many it's now become their new home. Here's today's Focus package.
From the Ottoman Empire to Marseille in southern France, 100 years of history that began with the arrival of tens of thousands of Armenians fleeing a genocide. Patrick Malakian's remembering his father Ashod, better known under his French name as filmmaker Henri Verneuil.
My father wasn't always recognized by his peers, but he was finally by the French state, his new homeland. That was hugely important for him, a great honor, receiving such distinctions.
In 1991, Verneuil finally turned to his own past for inspiration, releasing the biographical movie Myrig.
They left with nothing, just a few gold coins that my grandmother sewed up behind the buttons of her dress. That let them get out of the camps as quickly as possible by renting an attic room. The Armenian community loved the film, though the story wasn't the same for most of the tens of thousands of refugees. Christian Artan spent years archiving their history, preserving their memory through sharing their stories.
So, tell me what we have.
That's my mother, my aunt, and that's Garbi's sister.
Refugees leaving their homeland became stateless. UN predecessor, the League of Nations, issued the Nansen travel document, but there weren't enough for everyone. That was when the French diplomatic service stepped in.
The use of consuls and French consular representatives in Turkey, Syria or Lebanon was specifically for people without Nansen documents, who then came under French protection.
un titre de protégé français.
Almost overwhelmed, the government ordered Siméon Flessières to reopen wartime-era military camps. However, the mayor of Marseille wouldn't be giving them a warm welcome.
Flessières judged them by their complexion because he wasn't ready to take the refugees in.
Despite the horror of genocide and squalid conditions in the camps, one thing sparked the birth of a tight-knit society, the Armenian Church. Given permission to build on private land, the refugees created their community's foundation.
My father had a lovely expression. You go to church when you're Armenian, whether you believe or not. The only bonus the faithful have is that they have God with them.
Here at Marseille's Prado Cathedral, Patrick Melekian's roots go deep. His grandfather helped build it, and his father sang in its choir. The church, though, was just one legacy of the camps. The Armenians used any way they could find to keep up their spirits. A group of refugees from the Odo camp created the Armenian General Union. For most immigrants, UGA was about an escape from the camps and a taste of normal life.
The people who came, their aim was to survive, but also to integrate socially in French society. In our club, it was done through sport.
It's the city's third largest club after the famed Olympique de Marseille and counts adult professionals right down to an under-11 squad.
I love Armenia, and I asked my mum to sign me up for the club. Football's my life.
A life that these days also includes education. The Franco-Armenian Hamaskayan schools existed since 1980. Its express objective is to teach new generations about their own past. For pupils here, it's an inspiring curriculum.
Coming to this school is a good opportunity for me because it's the only one that conveys Armenian culture, values, history and identity.
My grandfather fought for France, so it really underlines that we have a dual culture and identity. And we're proud of both.
Pride the rest of Marseille also feels for its ethnic Armenians, as City Mayor Jean-Claude Gaudin paid them tribute.
We will do our utmost for it to be a wonderful year of Armenia in France and in Marseille.
100 years after the beginning of the genocide, Christian Artains worked hard to mark the occasion.
For the centenary, we wanted to pay homage to those still living. Well done. To our grandparents.
For many here, time's done little to temper raw memories.
Seeing them up there, bold as brass, I'm blown away. Oh look, there's my grandfather.
It may have been a century, but few Armenian descendants consider their struggle over.
We have to fight so that Turkey recognizes the genocide, for France to condemn its denial.
That's precisely the point for many brought up in the shadow of the genocide, and those who'll never be able to forget what was taken from them.
That was Luke Schregel with today's Focus report. If I could come back to you, Mr. Kouyoumjian, we heard there about how the Armenian community in France is really making big efforts to keep the Armenian culture and history alive. Is that something we're seeing across the Armenian diaspora? I mean, it's estimated to be almost 3 times the population of Armenia itself. Big efforts to keep the history of Armenia alive.
The answer to your question is double. The first is that it's a continuation of what has been a centuries-old tradition of education and culture. Turkish historians non-Armenian who have evaluated the late 18th and 19th century educational system in Turkey have said unanimously that only the Armenians had a series of national schools where education, not just Armenian education, was provided, and the state or non-state Turkish schools were lagging extremely far behind. So in a sense, they were doing what they knew to do and that they wanted to do. The reference to going to the Armenian church, whether you believed or not, that was given in that clip, it can be applied also to the question of culture, schooling, and language. On the other hand, it would be foolish and perhaps naive to suggest that in terms of keeping the language alive in the diaspora, we are winning. We are not winning, we are losing. And in that respect, Armenians are no different than most other people in terms of language loss, not cultural loss, but language loss in the diaspora. In France itself, for instance, we will see that the immigration from the Maghreb or other places it also represents a language loss, but hardly a cultural loss, as we're all aware. On the other hand, the Armenians who have always been able to adapt themselves to whatever situation they were in or are in, and they've had an experience of centuries of doing that, know quite well. It's almost, I would think, biological or in the ADN of the Armenians to figure out how it is that they will get along and get along well. In systems like those surrounding Armenia since the 7th century, when the Arabs conquered the area, even Armenia for a couple of centuries until Armenia freed itself. But during that time, this has been a dramatic challenge. For instance, of the peoples conquered, Christian peoples conquered to the north by the Arab Caliphate in the 7th, 8th, 9th century, by the 10th or 11th, many of them, including, for instance, the Copts in Egypt, much of the Syriacs and Syrians in Asia Minor, gradually lost their language and substituted for it Arabic as the language. But in Armenia, that did not happen, and the language, including its own alphabet, continued as an identity mark until today. One hopes that in the diaspora that will continue, but the effort is really dramatic and not a game that can be won easily.
Exactly, an uphill battle there. Mr. Leylekian, we were hearing the Armenians, they're losing the fight to protect the language, losing the fight also, as we heard in that clip, for this official recognition of the genocide. We also heard earlier, of course, Barack Obama rolling back the language there. Certainly, why is Armenia losing this fight on the international stage for this official recognition of genocide?
I'm not sure that Armenians, globally speaking, and Armenia are losing this fight. You know, 50 years ago, nobody was talking about an Armenian genocide, despite the fact that when Raphael Lemkin coined this word, he was specifically referring to the Armenian case before the Jewish case. He was present as this trial of Sohromon Tehlirian, who assassinated one of the responsible of the genocide, and was struck by the fact that a guy, so Sohromon Tehlirian, who killed one person, was rightfully, considered as a killer, and the victim that killed 1.5 million people was not considered as such. So, we from a legal perspective, maybe we failed up to now to set up the genocide term at the required level in the United Nations.
But things are beginning to change.
But in terms of awareness, of education, we succeed, in my view.
We'll have to leave it there. We've run out of time.